Welcome to Same Difference, the show in which I take two similar champions in League of Legends who would appear to serve the same purpose at first glance, and dissect them for their differences, which would define their pick conditions in coordinated play. Today, we're going to be looking at possibly the most contentious example of similar champions, Sona and Seraphine. Ever since Seraphine's release, the popular opinion among the community is that she's simply better Sona. They're both music-themed with similar abilities and both built to support their teammates, but Seraphine's abilities have more diversity in their output and more immediately noticeable impact. I'm on record as saying that I vehemently disagree with this take. From a draft perspective, both champions offer something different and equally valuable. In this video, I'm going to try to convince you of the competitive value of both champions by directly comparing all of their abilities for their objective strengths and weaknesses, comparing their interactions with the game's systems, and talking about the differences in when you can draft these champions. This video will assume that you're at least slightly familiar with the kits of both champions. Sona and Seraphine both have damaging Qs, AoE Ws that heal and shield, long linear AoE CC ultimates, and passives that interact with and empower their auto attacks and basic abilities. These kits look nearly identical, but their output is not the same. The first subtle difference we should talk about is in their ultimates. Obviously, these ultimates appear to be the same spell, albeit with one seeming to do more than the other. Seraphine's ultimate is significantly longer ranged than Sona's. Since Seraphine's ult extends its range every time it strikes either an enemy or an ally, a forward positioning teammate can turn Seraphine's ultimate into a disruption or catch tool that extends throughout the entire team fight, while also granting Seraphine bonus damage by stacking notes. That's proof that Seraphine's ultimate is simply Sona's ultimate but better, right? Well, that neglects Sona's numbers. Sona's cast time is half that of Seraphine's, the projectile speed is 1.5 times faster, the cooldown is lower, and the audio is quieter. Sona's ultimate is much harder to avoid on reaction, and serves as a more immediate defensive tool. It's far better at punishing momentary enemy oversteps in lane since it requires a smaller window. Sure, Seraphine's ultimate has more consistent proactive value, but Sona's is stronger as a reactive defensive tool. It's Sona who can peel for herself more immediately. Moving on to W, Seraphine would appear to gain the value of two of Sona's spells with just one cast, leaving room for even more power on her own E. Seraphine's W is a massive AoE shield, much larger in radius than Sona's auras, which also grants almost the exact movement speed values of Sona's E. Seraphine's W's conditional healing is gargantuan, healing for a percentage of missing health and scaling in power with all nearby allies. With the button saved by combining movement speed with her shield, Seraphine gains access to another long-ranged catch and damage tool. How is this not just better Sona? Her shield strength is even larger than Sona's. The answer is consistency, but to understand that, we need to look a bit deeper at both of their passives and how they interact with basic abilities. Seraphine's spells are all designed to synergize with themselves by using the Echo Cast mechanic. Every third basic ability of Seraphine's is duplicated, meaning Q has a greater opportunity to deal increased damage based on enemy missing health, E can more reliably apply a root or a stun instead of only a slow, and of course, W gains access to its conditional heal. The fact that Seraphine can only heal her allies if she's already shielded means that outside of specific cooperative or systemic elements, she can only heal by spending her Echo. Being generous and assuming that both champions have rank 5 Ws, Sona is casting her W for full value every time at half the cooldown, but even that difference in uptime is as biased in Seraphine's favor as possible. Rank 1 Seraphine W has a 28-second cooldown, while Sona's starts at 10 seconds, and it only gets better from there thanks to Sona's Accelerando passive, which grants her up to 60 permanent basic ability haste. Sona, once her passive is stacked, simply casts a lot more spells with more consistent effects than Seraphine does. When coupled with Moonstone, this means much greater shielding value throughout a teamfight. And remember, that means greater access to E move speed as well, making Sona better at shuttling her team across the map for macro play and at repositioning her allies during extended combat. Those are not strengths that can be ignored. The other components of their passives further illustrate the key difference in strengths between these two champions. Seraphine's notes lead to consistently higher damage from a safer range. Sona's power chords, her reward for casting 3 spells in a row, are a lot more versatile. While she also has access to a single chunky auto attack, she can instead choose to fire an unavoidable slow or actual damage reduction. This is one of the rarest effects in the game. Sona is literally the only champion that natively has enemy targeted damage reduction. Everyone else has to opt into exhaust, and we all know how powerful that spell can be, so imagine it on around a 5-second cooldown. I've been hyping up Sona's defensive utility and macro strengths, but of course, there's still one major advantage Seraphine has over Sona, which comes from the comparison of their Qs. Seraphine's Q, thanks to its damage increase against low HP targets interacting with its noticeably higher AP ratio, will consistently deal more damage, as long as you can land it. Sure, Seraphine's Q is a massive AoE with excellent range, but it's also very slow and easy for players to dodge. You could argue that Sona's untargeted Q is more consistent, and it is if fired in isolation, but Seraphine's kit is designed to catch and set up her damage, and her Q is simply better in the PvE department. The difference in wave clear between these champions isn't even close. Seraphine provides so much more pushing power than Sona does, with excellent early wave clear breakpoints and great minion execute potential. Hang on though, aren't simple farming patterns kind of a weird strength for a support champion to have? That's the key to the most significant difference between Sona and Seraphine. They're not even designed to play the same role. Seraphine is a champion who unlocks so much additional power through farming. Played in the support role, she's not able to capitalize fully on her neutralizing wave clear, which is one of her greatest strengths given the PvP unreliability of her skill shots. She's also moderately income reliant. She wants to purchase some ability power for her large Q ratio, she needs a lot of haste to cycle through echoes in a teamfight, Rylai's access removes the need to ever echo E in combat, and she's great at applying Putrefier. You actually want Seraphine having the choice between Liandry's and Moonstone, and having access to a full inventory of legendaries, because that unlocks a lot of the output that makes this champion worth playing. Sona isn't nearly as item reliant. Her Mythic and Accelerando passive are sufficient, and she doesn't lose output from interacting less with the wave. Her base kit contains most of her power, it just takes a while for that power to come online. Sona is notoriously squishy with absolute minimal influence over her lane. She's certainly not doing as much to neutralize the generic enemy as Seraphine, but if given a slow lane, she will do a lot more with less income. To bring the differences all together, Seraphine is a higher purity teamfight champion than Sona, while also being generally easier to draft. You would want to draft Seraphine for her artillery mage elements as well as her enchanter strength, ideally making the most of her flex potential, but defaulting to using her in the bot lane. At most levels of play, bot lane Seraphine is a develop class pick, which means that she can be blind picked into her direct matchup, but communicates to your enemy what your comp's direction will be, that direction being a teamfight archetype with an emphasis on topside performance. Mid lane Seraphine has to contend with some difficult assassin counter picks, but is otherwise very stable, and support Seraphine is only getting consistent value as Ashe's support, or as an answer to heavy shove when Karma or Lux aren't available. That said, because Seraphine has at least one role with a blind pickable matchup spread, her early rotation flex potential is unlocked. Seraphine has a larger comp building cost than Sona does. To gain her full potential, she needs to be supported by melee teamfighters, a frontline, or a skirmish core. Forward positioning allies provide protection to the vulnerable Seraphine while also capitalizing on the reach of her utility. If she's a mid laner, she also needs a pure carry jungler, otherwise who will profit from her expected shove and early utility. That said, that's not a very high cost. It's really not even that hard to find a support to help her manage her most dangerous ADC matchups, or a consistent blind pick carry between either your top laner or jungler. Sona, meanwhile, is never a champion you can blind pick recklessly. She leans more heavily towards control archetypes and will always slow down the game for her teammates. You would want to draft Sona for the promise of obscene scaling and defensive utility, which rewards you for making it to the end game with virtually unlosable teamfights. But Sona is a response class champion. She contributes so little to the early game that she simply loses some 2v2 lane matchups and causes some others to snowball onto the rest of the map even without a gold lead, so we should only draft her when her full bot lane matchup is known. The best case for a Sona lane is when the enemy offers a scaling handshake, since Sona will always gain more scaling value. This is why she's commonly used as an answer to Sivir Yuumi lanes. Fortunately, Sona has no necessary synergies within her team. The only constraint within her own composition is that it can't contain any aggro champions who no longer function when the game goes late. So if you have support counterpick, the pieces you've drafted already lean towards teamfight or control archetypes, and you see a valid Sona lane, there's not a lot stopping you from taking that opportunity. Those opportunities are just a lot less common than the opportunities in which you can draft Seraphine. So now that we've seen how the output of Sona and Seraphine differs, we can understand how these two champions who are nearly identical on the surface can be so different at a strategic level. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and a comment, and if you'd like to see more of this series of champion guides or of deep dives into complex strategic concepts throughout League of Legends, please consider subscribing. Thanks again to my patrons, SonicX5040, Mel7401, and Hailfire. Your support makes these videos possible.